Welcome, Lee here from Play Guitar Academy with another Why They Work video. Today I'm going to take the next step with our 3-note blues chords by using something called voice leading. This is perfect to learn for intermediate blues guitar players. But before we get started, if you struggle with chords that click, they buzz, you've got muted strings, none of these chords are going to sound great, click below to download my free guide to clear sounding chords, and in it I will help you make all the adjustments you need to clear up all of your basic chords. Okay, let's get started with the lesson. We're going to start off with our triangle chords. These are A7, D7, and E7 with the root note on the low string. And each note here in the A7, we have an A, a C sharp, and a G. Remember from last week's 3-note chord voicings, we can get rid of the fifth and sometimes even the root. But we have the major third and the flat seventh in the chord. That's going to outline the chord here. And as we move through them, our next chord is a D7. This has got a D, an F sharp, and a C. It's missing the fifth. It's missing an A. And we slide it up 2 frets. Here's our 5 chord. This is an E, a G sharp, and a D. It's missing the B. That's the fifth of that chord. So each of these chords is missing the fifth, giving us our really cool 3-note chord voicings. But what we're doing today is we're going to be talking about why I chose these together, where these notes are going. We're going to be using something called voice leading. Voice leading is a very, very powerful tool to make your chords sound interesting and have a lot of really neat movement. Think of each note of your chord as a singer, one voice, and then the next one is the next voice, and the next one is the next voice. It's like 3 people singing together. I've got my A, C sharp, and G. This C sharp, this is someone singing one note. Now when we go to the next chord, a half step away from that is our D note from the next chord. So we went C sharp to D. Either movement of a half step or a whole step is very important for voice leading. It sounds like we're smoothly going into the chords instead of jumping around on the guitar and having big long jumps. This is going to sound really nice and really intentional. And let's take a look at the last note, the G. When we now move to the next chord, we have a note that's right next to that, the F sharp in the D7. So the G is going down to the F sharp, while in the other way, the C sharp is going up to the D. We have 2 places between these 2 chords where there's half step movement. It's a very strong sound. And of course, everything from the D7 sliding up 2 frets, that's a whole step away. Very cool stuff. So now in progression 2, we're going to work our way across this area of the guitar. If you think about it, if you make this big A7 chord here, we're taking little 3-note sections of this chord and building new chord progressions around that. And this is one of the first places you'll see that. Right here, we're going to use the A string, the D string, and the G string to start off with, and then we'll move up a string after that. So let's take a look at this. We have the E, that's on the 7th fret of the A string, then on the 5th fret of the D string, we have our G, and then on the 6th fret of the G string, we have our C sharp. E, G, and C sharp. All we're missing from that chord is the A note, the root. But if you have a backing track, if you have a bass player, or a piano player, not an issue at all. We still have the functional notes, the C sharp, the major third, and the G, the flat 7th. Now watch where we go to here. We're going to go to the next set of strings, and we're going to play the 7th fret on the D string, that's an A, the 5th fret on the G string, that's our C, and then our F sharp on the 7th fret of the B string. So this is the A, C, and F sharp, the 5th, the flat 7th, and the major third of a D7 chord. We're also missing the root from this chord. So 2 chords in a row. Now I'm not missing the root at all. I can hear it. I feel that chord progression going back and forth. Let's take a look now when we add the E7 chord. So the E7 chord we're playing today. On the 6th fret, we have our G sharp on the D string. On the 7th fret on the G string, we have our D. And then we have our E on the 5th fret of the B string. That's the E is the root, the G sharp is the major third, and D is the flat 7. This one is missing the 5th. So we have 2 chords that are missing the root. And then finally 1 chord that's missing the 5th. But let's take a look at the voice leading from this. So our first chord, let's take a look at the C sharp up here on the G string. As we move to our D7, that moves a half step backwards for the C note, the flat 7th in D7. Pretty cool stuff. And on the D string, the G note at the 5th fret moves up a whole step to the A. So we have some pretty good voice leading between those two chords, but let's take a look at our next chord. If we go from the D7 to the E7, we have our F sharp coming back to E a whole step, our D coming back to C a whole step. And that's a cool sound. 2 of the lines are going down, 1 is going up by a half step. Okay, so now we're working across this big A7 chord and we're taking 3-note sections of it and voice leading from there. So this next one, we're getting up into a higher register now. These are some 3-note chords that will cut through pretty nicely. On the 5th fret, we're gonna have our A7 and we have our lowest note is the G, that's on the 5th fret of the D string. And then we have a C sharp, that's on the 6th fret of the G string. And then on the B string at the 5th fret, we have our E. So this is missing the root here. All we have is our flat 7, our major 3rd, and our 5th here. This is an A chord, A7, and I can hear it as an A7. I'm not missing that root. I feel that information in, my ear's feeling that in. But as we move to our D7 next to it, so this is going to be the C note at the 5th fret on the G string, and that is the F sharp on the 7th fret of the B string, and then the A up top on the high E string at the 5th fret. You can think of that as the top 3 notes of one of these D7 chords. So back and forth. We have our downward movement, our voice leading from C sharp in the A7 chord down to C in the D7 chord. And we also have our upward movement from the E to the F sharp. But let's take a look at our last voicing here. So when we go from the D7 to the E7, here our E7 is the D note on the 7th fret of the G string, the E note 5th fret of the B string, and then the G sharp, that's the 4th fret on the high E string. This is a cool voicing. And this is the flat 7th, the root, and the major 3rd. So we're only missing the 5th from this chord here. But let's see how it goes back and forth between the D7 chord there. So our D7 has an A on the top string, but it goes back to a G sharp for the E7 chord. So there's a half step movement there. The F sharp on the D7 chord moves back to the E, and the D on the E7 chord moves back to the C for the D7. So 1 half step and 2 whole steps. Really nice voice leading. So finally, our highest voicing now, we're going to put our first finger on the 7th fret of the D string. That's our A note. We're going to put our C sharp note with the 6th fret on the G string, and then our G note with the 8th fret on the B string. Has that Born on the Bayou sound to me. As we move over, we're going to move to our D7th chord. Now this is one, it looks kind of like one of these Texas A7 chords here. So we have a D note on the 7th fret of the G string, F sharp note on the 7th fret of the B string, and the C note on the 8th fret of the high E string. Now back and forth from that, these are very close together chords and they sound really nice together. So with this, we have 2 notes. We have the C sharp going up to the D, and we have the G note going back to the F sharp. So 2 places we have a half step movement there. Very cool voice leading and a very cool sounding chord. But here we go. We've got one more chord to get to today, and that is our E7th chord. This is up at the 7th fret, and we have a D note at the 7th fret on the G string. We have a G sharp note on the 9th fret of the B string, and then we have our B note on the 7th fret of the high E string. So all we're missing is the root. G sharp is the major 3rd, the B is the 5th, and the D is the flat 7th. But watch this as I go back and forth between this E7 and this D7. They share a note, which is the D, and on the high string, the C note comes back a half step to the B, and then on the B string, the F sharp goes up a whole step to the G sharp. So really cool voice leading here, and a cool chord progression that I will use a lot. Thanks for playing along today, and thanks to all of our Academy members over at playguitaracademy.com. They are tearing into the tab, the guitar profiles, and this chord chart right now. Don't forget to download my guide to clear sounding chords if your chords are struggling. This is going to make all of this easier for you. And as always, let me know what you think in the comments. Have a great practice. I'll see you in the next video.